Strangely enough, I think before war broke out, we sensed it. Everybody sensed that eventually war would break out. In fact, as I remember it, there was a sense of relief. Now, that's a strange thing to say, but it was.
It was just over the August bank holiday. We had friends down for the bank holiday, and we were watching the papers. Of course, there were no radio in those days. There was no means of hearing anything unless you got the papers. So we were watching the papers, and then the announcement came. We were now at war. It was a fearful shock. I don't think even up to that moment we had realized that war was imminent, was just coming on top of us. And then, of course, the first reaction was, well, what can we do?
It was on the newspaper placards when Dad came home at night, and it said, war's been declared on Germany. All volunteers are mobilised immediately, and adverts on the papers, on the placards and everything. People who followed politics, of course, suspected it, but I don't think I bothered much about it. You don't when you're young and having a good time. I did lots of nights out. My brother and I, we had lots of lovely nights out and dancing. Then we could dance till 3 a.m. and get up and go to work all right in the morning. But then I had umpteen boyfriends in that time too. I always got somewhere to take me. I wasn't a bit interested in the war.
I remember when war was declared, going outside Buckingham Palace and cheering with all the crowds as the King and Queen came out on the balcony and being frightfully excited and thinking it was splendid that we were going into the war and all the rest of it.
A young man from there came across the yard to my mother in the washhouse, and he said to her, here you are, here's a cup of tea. This is the last you'll have now the war's on. And that frightened me out of my wits.
Everybody was delighted, and we thought it far more amusing to go and see some part of the continent than to go on manoeuvres. And literally cheers went up from each side of the barrack square.
In 1914, I was 7. The first memory I had was of the German hiding in the ruins, and we knew that it was a war then, but we weren't really conscious of it. We were too young. But later on, of course, it slowly dawned on me what was happening.
Of course, when it began to sink into people's minds that we were at war with Germany, and we had been more or less conditioned to the eventual war with our boys' magazines and comics and one thing and another. Of course, everybody was saying, oh, well, the war will be over by Christmas. And it was on that assumption that people began to accept the fact that the inevitable had happened, and that was that.
One night it was declared, and it seemed as though the world had come to an end. And suddenly everybody's sons and brothers and husbands were soldiers. And suddenly there were crowds of men rushing to enlist, and hordes of men tramping along the streets in platoons and on top of the trams. A song seemed to rise Tipperary, which they all sang and whistled as they marched.
Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Edinburgh Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary.